Allegiance. Good morning. I was just going to start with a couple brief items. I think first, all of us want to welcome the new governor. It's exciting times. Obviously, Governor Brown will always be in our history, in our hearts, but we wish he and Ann well at Calusa. I was also going to just announce generally that we haven't finished this IEPR, but the next IEPR, Commissioner Scott will be the lead on that. She's working on the scoping of it. It will probably focus primarily on transportation and equity issues. But just so everyone knows that part. I'm going to make a slight adjustment to the schedule. Looking at sort of the number of attendees in time, I'm going to shift item 2 to after item 5. I think we have probably more people here for 4 and 5 than for 2, and 2 will take a fair bit of time given closed session. So anyway, just giving people a heads up on the timing. So let's start with the disclosures and then we'll go on to consent.
Great, thank you, Chair Weisenmiller. So I have 2 disclosures. It is this time of year again, and I'm teaching a renewable energy law class at King Hall at UC Davis. So on item 1B on the agenda, UC Davis is a prime contractor. On item 7D, UC Davis is a subcontractor on that item. And neither of those items pertain to the law school or King Hall, but nevertheless, I wanted to make this disclosure. Thank you.
On item 1A, I'm going to recuse myself. I'm on the board of the Alliance to Save Energy, and that item is directly related to that entity and our membership there.
Good. So let's take up on the consent calendar everything but item A. Everything but A. But A. Yeah. So
I move consent calendar except for item A.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So the consent calendar, except for item A, is passed 5-0. So Commissioner McAllister is leaving the room. So now let's go to item A.
Move consent calendar item 1A.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So this passes 4-0 with one recusal. So now again, we're going to skip item 2 and go directly to item 3.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Mary Dias. I'm with the Compliance Office of the Siting, Transmission, and Environmental Protection Division. I'm the Energy Commission Staff Compliance Project Manager for the Sacramento Power Authority's Campbell Cogeneration Project. And with me this morning is Staff Counsel Lisa DiCarlo, and staff is also in attendance. Today, staff is requesting approval of a petition to amend the Commission final decision for the Campbell Cogeneration Facility to install a wet compression system upgrade, to replace and upgrade existing burners, and to increase the startup carbon monoxide emission limit to reflect actual startup emissions. The 158 megawatt cogeneration project was certified by the Energy Commission in 1994, and the project began commercial operation in 1997. The facility is located at 3215 47th Avenue in an unincorporated area of Sacramento County. The project is on approximately 5.8 acres adjacent to the former Campbell Soup facility in which cogeneration ceased in 2016. On November 2nd, 2018, the Sacramento Power Authority filed a petition to amend with the Energy Commission requesting to modify the Campbell Cogeneration project to install a Siemens wet compression system upgrade in order to reclaim electrical production typically lost during high ambient temperature conditions, to replace the existing burners with upgraded Siemens HR3 burners, and to increase the startup carbon monoxide emission limit to reflect actual startup emissions. The modifications will not increase either electrical generation or fuel consumption beyond the existing license limits. Staff determined that the technical area of air quality will be affected by the proposed project changes and has proposed revised conditions of certification in order to ensure compliance with laws, ordinances, regulations, and standards. Staff recommends that 4 existing Energy Commission conditions of certification be modified to reflect the changes in the carbon monoxide limit. Staff also recommends that 42 other conditions of certification be modified with administrative changes to align them with the current permit with the Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality Management District. These revisions, including the modification of the carbon monoxide limit, would not cause any additional air quality impacts or adversely affect the ability of the project to comply with laws, ordinances, regulations, and standards. On January 3rd, 2019, the Sacramento Power Authority submitted comments on staff's analysis, and staff is in agreement with the comments. On January 8th, 2019, an information request letter was docketed by the Union Pacific Railroad Real Estate Division. Staff contacted a representative of the Real Estate Division and confirmed that the response to the letter is only required if proposed work affects the railroad. In this particular case, the proposed petition to amend does not involve the railroad, and therefore no response is needed. Staff has determined that the changes proposed in the petition to amend comply with the requirements of Title 20, Section 1769A of the California Code of Regulations, and recommends approval of the project modification and associated revisions of the air quality conditions of certification. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to applicant.
Hello, good morning. My name is Eric Poff. I am manager for the thermal generation. Sorry. How's that? Hello. Better. Good morning. My name is Eric Poff. I am the manager for the thermal generation assets for SMUD. Beside me is Joe Schofield, the Deputy General Counsel for SMUD. And on SMUD's behalf, we would just like to thank the commissioners for hearing the petition this morning. We'd also like to thank the CEC staff, California Energy Commission staff, for review and approval of the petition. And we'd also like to thank the Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality Management District staff for their review and approval of the petition. Finally, I'd like to address the letter that we received late yesterday from Union Pacific. I also reached out to the point of contact with Union Pacific earlier this morning and was informed, as CEC staff was, that the letter is a form letter that is sent out whenever they receive a notification. They receive approximately 5,000 notifications a year, and this is their standard process. I informed her that our project is specifically related to the combustion turbine building and would have no impact on the railroad's right-of-ways, and she informed me that no further action was needed. And we are open for any question that the commission may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's start with, are there any comments from anyone in the room? Any comments from anyone on the line? Then let's transition over to the commission, to the full commission. Commissioner Douglas?
Well, just some brief comments. I've reviewed the materials on this proposed amendment, and I support it. I think it obviously is important to be able to generate the power that's needed during times when the air temperatures are hot and the power is really needed. And so I think it's a valuable proposed change. I appreciate staff's rigorous review of the air quality and update of the conditions to reflect that. So if there are, I don't know if there are any other questions. In that case, I'll move approval of this item.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
This item passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go on to item 4.
Okay, good morning, Commissioners. I'm Alejandro Galdames. I work for the Efficiency Division under the Appliances Office. I'm here seeking adoption of the regulation for air compressors and the negative declaration under CEQA. I'm going to talk about what we concluded in regards to the requirements of the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA. The proposed standard will reduce electricity consumption criteria, pollutants, and other particulates. The materials used for the manufacture, as well as the lifetime of the covered appliances, will not change due to the proposed regulation. We also did not receive any comments challenging our determination under CEQA, where we determined that the proposed regulation has no significant adverse effect to the environment. We therefore recommend for the Commission to adopt the proposed negative declaration under CEQA. Going back to the proposed standard, let me first give you some background for the regulation. The U.S. Department of Energy published a final rule notice on December 5th of 2016. Unfortunately, DOE did not finalize the process and publish the proposed regulation into the Code of Federal Regulations, Title 10. And since then, since the rule was not published and therefore not finalized, California was not and is not preempted for setting the standard as a state regulated standard, state efficiency standard. The scope of the proposed regulation is for compressors, air compressors that will, for commercial and industrial air compressors that are rotary, lubricated, liquid or air-cooled, and have a fixed variable speed brushless electric motor with nominal horsepower between 10 and 200 horsepower. In addition, the air compressor is only for those that operate between 75, an air gauge pressure of 75 and 200 pounds per square inch. The test procedure under the proposed regulation was finalized by the Department of Energy and therefore is incorporated by reference. It's located in the Code of Federal Regulations, Title 10, Subpart T of Appendix A. In addition, and in order to reduce test burden to manufacturers, we are proposing to allow for the use of alternative efficiency determination methods, or better known as AEDMs for compressors. This method is also incorporated by reference and is in the Code of Federal Regulations, Title 10, Sections 42963 and 429.470 to be exact. The Energy Commission staff is proposing the same efficiency level as the one proposed under DOE. This graph depicts that. It's the green line right here. Any compressor that performs on or above this green line is basically compliant. Any compressor under the line will have to be re-engineered and cannot be offered for or sold in California. We determined or concluded that the proposed regulation is technically feasible, since there are compressors that currently operate above or at the efficiency level of the previous slide. In addition, there are technologies available for redesign. Some examples of this are multi-staging and improvements and auxiliary components improvement. Energy Commission agrees with DOE's determination that these and other technologies are currently available to achieve compliance to the proposed regulation. To better illustrate the technical feasibility, I'm including this slide for one of the 4 different types of compressors that DOE studied. The graph is for a rotary fixed-speed lubricated air-cooled air compressor. As it can be seen here, the majority of the available compressors are under the scope are currently are above the efficiency level 2, the blue line on the graph. I only included one graph since all of the other 3 compressors are similar on the number of compressors that are already compliant to the proposed regulation. Energy Commission staff concluded after receiving some comments that the first year electricity savings for the calculated are for about 17 gigawatt hours, which equate to $2.4 million in savings for California. The life cycle annual electricity savings for California were concluded to be around 217 gigawatt hours per year. That's the annual net benefit was calculated to be approximately 22 million with a 3% discount rate. This is a net benefit cost ratio that varies from 2 to 1 to 6 to 1 depending on the type of compressor. We received in total 11 comments. 3 of them were in total support. 6 of the comments supported the regulation but wanted some changes. We also received 2 comments in opposition for the proposed regulation. Energy Commission staff have concluded, after considering all the comments, that the proposed standard is technically feasible and cost-effective, and recommends the adoption of the proposed regulation by the California Energy Commission with a compliance date of January 1st, 2022. With that, I finish my presentation, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Let's start with getting public comment. Michelle Chester?
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Michelle Chester. I'm with the firm Somax Simmons & Dunn, and I'm here today on behalf of Atlas Copco North America. We have been an active participant in the ongoing appliance energy efficiency rulemaking for the air compressors and appreciate the opportunity to comment on and discuss with staff the proposed rulemaking. We are asking today that you postpone the vote on this item or deny moving forward with this rulemaking as written. We do support proposed requirements for air compressors, but as we've commented, this support is contingent on revisions to the proposed regulatory language to allow for the use of historical ISO 1217 test data to certify compliance with the energy efficiency standards. The Commission's proposed rule intends to follow federal efficiency and testing procedures, but implementation of DOE's testing standard was suspended before manufacturers received the clarity they needed regarding procedures for compliance certification. In order to provide manufacturers that certainty to certify compliance of their products for sale in the California market and to provide certainty for consumers in the California market, we are asking that you explicitly allow for use of historical ISO 1217 test data for compliance certification. We do not believe this approach would result in a sacrifice to the Commission's desired energy efficiency goals. The ISO 1217 test method is widely used by manufacturers and is proven to provide accurate readings of a unit's energy efficiency. While the DOE test method is based on the ISO 1217 test method, DOE test procedures differ most significantly in that it requires testing of 2 units of the same model, while the ISO 1217 test method requires testing of just 1 unit. There are differences between the 2 test methods, but the differences do not result in significant differences between the data. Requiring use of DOE's test procedure would invalidate almost all historical ISO 1217 data, since older tests were run on 1 machine, not 2 of the same model. Additionally, the delayed operative date of January 1st, 2022 does not provide relief to manufacturers. Atlas Copco units manufactured before 2022 have already achieved the desired energy efficiency levels as shown by prior ISO 1217 test data and methods. Those same models with the same level of energy efficiency supported by ISO 1217 test methods and data cannot be certified for sale on the California market without the expensive and time-consuming task of retesting those models to the federal standard without any additional improvements in energy efficiency. Additionally, we're concerned that staff has not responded to Atlas Copco's comments that an important reference to the Code of Federal Regulations has been omitted from the proposed regulatory language. This is specifically Section 431343 under Title 10, concerning the federal test methods upon which the Commission's rules rely. Additionally, because today's vote on this item was noticed before the close of the 45-day comment period and before the January 3rd hearing on this matter, we're asking that you take the time to consider any comments, and we believe that it prematurely foreclosed any possibility of providing 15-day language responding to these comments and revising the language.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Charles Kim?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioners. I'm Charles Kim of the Southern California Edison Company. Proposed adoption is another example of CEC's leadership on energy efficiency. CEC's leadership, therefore California's leadership on energy efficiency, is not just put regulation on a book, but it acts like a force for market transformation. Southern California Edison, like many other utilities, has been incentivizing technologies, including air compressors, so that our customer has a choice of purchasing more energy efficient that brings a savings and that use the energy wisely. And the proposed regulation gonna bring more clarity to the baseline of our incentive programs that we don't have right now. And then it's gonna continue act like a force for the market transformation. That market transformation, working with the regulatory folks with the incentive program, can clearly bring benefits to Californians. And second thing is that I want to mention is that the proposed regulation is very, very cost effective. The cost benefit ratio is ranging from 2:1 to 6:1. That gives us assurance that the proposed regulation going to bring benefits to our customers, therefore Californians, greatly. That gave us assurance. Third thing is that the proposed language is technically feasible. If you look at the existing compressors on the chart that your staff analyzed very diligently, not just one or two products meet those standards. Existing product that I'm talking about. Majority, some of them is like 75% of the market, existing data, existing product already meet those proposed regulations. California's IU's proposal, we propose a higher level efficiency. That is also cost effective. But knowing the sensible approach that CEC is taking, and then knowing that there's a effort has been taken at the DOE, and then aligning DOE's effort in California to bring and saving opportunities to California, that shows our leadership once again, and we care about those opportunities. And I'm very, very appreciative for taking those leads, the CEC taking those leads to make this one happen. So my commend goes to all the staff, Alex, Leah, Chris, Kristen, and Paxton, to make this proposal possible. So once again, I'm very thankful for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room with comments? Then let's go on the line. Please, Mr. Kaufman, go forward.
Knuffman. Good morning, Commissioners. Chris Knuffman, Quincy Compressor. We appreciate the opportunity to comment. Quincy Compressor makes rotary screw air compressors at our factory in Bay Minette, Alabama. These machines are subject to the Commission's proposed efficiency rule. Quincy supports the adoption of the rule, provided it is amended to allow the use of accurate data from prior testing in order to certify compliance with the efficiency rule. Right now, such data cannot be used. Quincy has conducted costly tests of its rotary screw air compressors using the federal DOE method this proposal would use to certify the compliance with the California standard. Since the January 4th, 2017 DOE test method was published in the Federal Register, but primarily in the past 12 months, with a very high priority in our R&D lab, Quincy has tested in excess of 60 different basic models and has published DOE data on Quincy's Compressor's website. As many as 220 models must be shown to comply either with testing or mathematical methods validated with test data. Testing work to date would cost around $240,000 at third-party lab rates. Even though Quincy has used the correct tests and procedures, adoption of the proposed rule as written would preclude the use of these test results to certify compliance. This is because no laboratory anywhere has been certified by California to conduct this federal test. Under current rules, it appears that no laboratory can be certified until early 2020. Nor does it appear that certification retroactively validates earlier test results, even though there is no question about the accuracy of the results. Quincy Compressor asks that the Commission direct the issuance of a proposed amendment to fix this problem. Quincy asks that the Commission seek comment on the proposed revised language presented with Atlas Copco's December 21st, 2018 comments, language which would include and allow the use of prior DOE tests or prior industry test data from ISO 1217 on which DOE's methods are based. That revision would add language to section 1606 of the rules to authorize such use as accurate prior test data for certification and validation. Quincy understands that the adoption of such requested language would be subject to a 15-day notice and comment procedural requirement before the Commission can act and make the final action on such relief. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Good morning. My name is Brian Boyce. I'm with Energy Solutions on behalf of the California Investor-Owned Utilities. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. The IOUs strongly support the proposed commercial and industrial rotary air compressor standard before the commissioners. The compressor standard will be a significant achievement as it will be one of the first standards in the world for this equipment. The standard is technically feasible and cost-effective. The Energy Commission estimates that the standard will save 217 gigawatt hours of energy annually by 2035, the year of stock turnover. The Energy Commission should require the DOE test procedure for compressors. The test procedure was approved through a notice and comment rulemaking at DOE. DOE made significant concessions to manufacturers between the notice and proposed rule and final rule stages. The changes brought the test procedure in closer alignment with the industry standard test procedure ISO 1217. Areas where DOE continued to deviate from ISO 1217 included more stringent sampling requirements and tighter tolerances. This ensures accurate ratings. The Energy Commission also made several significant accommodations to manufacturers during this rulemaking process. First, the effective date was extended from 1 year after adoption to nearly 3 years, which is much longer than the statutory requirements of the Warren-Alquist Act. Second, the Energy Commission is allowing AEDMs, which reduces the physical lab test burden for manufacturers, a practice typically employed at the federal level but unusual for California. Third, manufacturers can use old test data if they can prove that the tests were conducted in accordance with the newer DOE requirements. Allowing older test data that is not DOE compliant is a risky move that could run afoul of preemption laws at the federal level. Regarding the efficiency standard itself, the Energy Commission has elected to require a scope of products and efficiency levels equivalent to what DOE chose, known as Efficiency Level 2. While the IOUs recommended EL3 due to it saving more energy while still being cost-effective, we understand that as this is the first energy standard for rotary compressors, there is wisdom in choosing the lower efficiency level to allow the marketplace to transition to this new paradigm. In summary, the Energy Commission has proposed a technically feasible energy standard for compressors based on the consensus-based DOE test procedure. California's standard is based on DOE's pre-published standard, which itself was mere days away from finalization in early 2017. The standard will be cost-effective and result in significant benefits for Californians. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, so staff, do you have any comments or any responses to any of the comments?
Just that DOE test, oh, sorry, I'm Alejandro again. The test data, as DOE test data that is currently happening right now under the DOE test procedure will be accepted for certification of the appliance. Just to clarify, because I think there's a lot of confusion if DOE test data that is DOE test procedure data that is currently being analyzed because they're following the DOE test procedure, if that will be accepted by us, and the answer is basically yes.
Can I ask for more,
Yeah.
sort of a deeper explanation of why Quincy's concerns that will allay the concerns concerns that were expressed by Quincy? Because I think there's some misunderstanding about what a certified lab actually is. So it would be good to have some deeper clarity on that.
You mean the process of how we go by certifying the lab?
Yeah, I mean in the common. I mean, maybe Kristen can explain, but in the common understanding of what a certified test lab is, it's more like a nationally certified test laboratory which is a much more complicated thing than what we're talking about here. So could one of you kind of dig into that a little bit?
Sure.
Sure, this is Kristen Driscoll. I'm the Deputy Director of the Efficiency Division. We require test labs to come into our database as approved test labs. It's a different process from industry certification, as Commissioner McAllister noted. What we require, among other things, is that the test lab have conducted the applicable test procedure within the 12 months before they come in for approval. So that's the 12-month window that Quincy is talking about. If they can't use the test results 12 months before that, what do they do? That just says that they've run the test procedure sometime in the last year. We're trying to emphasize that they know how to run the test, they've done it before. Any test results that are done according to the test procedure, whether they occur before the test lab is approved or after the test lab approved, is fine for certification to our database. And our regulations are pretty clear on this, and this is across all appliances, not specific to compressors. Does that answer, help elaborate on that issue?
Yeah, and I guess what does certification mean from our perspective in terms of it allows them to do what?
To be clear, we don't certify test labs. We simply approve test labs. The requirements for approval, I think there's 5 or 6 requirements. I mentioned the one about having conducted the test in the last 12 months. They also have to certify that their test labs are calibrated according to the appropriate test methods, and that I forget all of the other requirements. I apologize. But it's a pretty simple process. It's a simple application to the commission. You submit it through our database. And then within usually 1 to 2 business days, we approve the application, unless we're aware of an issue with that test lab.
So I guess what I'm really trying to get at is that an in-house testing lab is perfectly fine.
Yes,
right?
It's pretty common, actually.
So I think hopefully you can get on the same page with Quincy and allay those fears, because it sounds like they're doing the right thing and testing the right procedure, and we'll have the right data for us.
Yes. If I can briefly follow up on a couple other comments that were made and make sure we respond to them here. Thank you for bringing up Quincy. That was a good response. Atlas Copco also raised a few issues that I think we should just touch on. They mentioned historical test data under ISO 1217, and I just want to be clear that manufacturers are required to submit data under penalty of perjury to our database, and that the data that they're submitting is based on testing that has been done in accordance with the test procedures in Section 1604, which is in this case the federal test procedure, which we are preempted from having a different test procedure, so that's why we have that one in there. If they are willing to certify that their test data is in accordance with that test procedure in Section 1604, then we have no objection. If, on the other hand, they feel they need to retest in order to make that certification, then that's what they will have to do. But the burden is really on the manufacturer to make sure that the test data they submit is in accordance with the DOE test procedure. They mentioned needing to test 2 units of the same model. That may be true if they use an alternative efficiency determination method. Sometimes that requires sampling and using multiple multiple tests of the same model, or even 2 different models tested. However, for our regulations, we only require testing of a single unit in order to certify that test data to the database, or that model. They mentioned incorporation by reference of 10 CFR section 431.343. We don't feel it's necessary to incorporate that specific section. That section says DOE incorporates by reference ISO 1217. However, we incorporated the actual test procedure in section 431.344, which in turn incorporates ISO 1217. So to incorporate 343 would be duplicative, so we didn't do it here. And we haven't done it traditionally in our regulations. And last, Ms. Chester just touched on this at the end about having noticed this business meeting before the end of the comment period. This is not unusual, and it's not a violation of either the APA or any due process requirements, unless Jackie Moore tells me otherwise, but I don't think she will. And it's really something that we do as a matter of course. Had we decided as staff to propose 15-day language, we could have either recommended to our executive director to pull the item before the business meeting, or come to you today and recommend that you send us back to do 15-day language, neither of which is our recommendation. We recommend moving forward with this proceeding.
Okay, so let's transition to discussion by the commissioners. Commissioner McAllister.
So thanks for that last point. I was going to make it as well, and we'll just, I think, reiterate for emphasis that, if we don't make any changes to what's already out there for 45-day, then we don't need that extra time. Doesn't mean we haven't listened, right? We have listened and we've considered, and that will be reflected in all the forthcoming documentation. But if we're going to make changes, then we have to extend. And so I guess, really the question is whether these two test procedures are or are not equivalent, and it sounds like even Atlas doesn't think they are. And so it's pretty clear we have to use the new one. So I don't really see what, if anything, would change with more time. Industry has not put that sort of information in the record, and it seems that based on the statement they would not. So given that, I think we should move forward because this is the way it'll end up. Any comments on this?
No, I found the discussion helpful, though, and appreciated staff's responses to the issues raised.
Yeah, and I want to just emphasize before the vote, the process is the lifeblood of this. And so I want to emphasize again, all the information that industry has at its disposal ought to be put into the record if industry thinks that it's going to affect, or anybody, any stakeholder, that it's going to affect the outcome. So, I just want to, I seem to do this every time we vote on a compliance standard, but it all gets listened to and it all gets read and it all gets treated. So whether, everybody doesn't have to agree and sing kumbaya at the end, but that is the process. And so, if folks want a different outcome, they need to argue persuasively for it. So with that, I'll move item 4.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Item 4 passes 5-0. Thank you. Let's go on to item 5.
Okay, I believe I have a presentation. So, good morning, Commissioners. My name is Nick Fugate. I'm with the Energy Assessments Division, and I'm here today to propose adoption of an update to the California Energy Demand Forecast for 2018 to 2030. The forecast was originally adopted in February of 2018, and the update I'm presenting here reflects changes we have observed in the past year. Because our forecast is a biennial process, and because it is used by many agencies in annual planning, we provide these updates to ensure that planners are working with current projections. At the very highest level, the demand forecast, which answers questions about how much electricity we need, when and where we need it, it lays the foundation for a whole host of state-sponsored planning activities aimed at keeping California's electricity reliable, affordable, and environmentally responsible. More specifically, it feeds into resource planning at the CPUC to ensure that ratepayer dollars are invested where and only where they're needed. And also transmission studies at the ISO to identify necessary or economic infrastructure investments. And lastly, the forecast provides important information for setting and tracking progress towards the state's energy and climate goals. For past updates, we refreshed only the economic and demographic projections that drive our forecast, leaving most everything else unchanged. But electric vehicles and behind-the-meter PV are expected to have an increasingly significant impact, not just on total energy demand, but on the shape of that load, how it rises and falls in a given day, month, or year. And so for this update, not only have we refreshed our projections of these load modifiers, but we have improved our hourly model in order to better assess their impacts. And now that we have this hourly model, and because monthly peak loads are an important consideration for resource adequacy, we are proposing now to adopt for the first time a monthly peak forecast for the California ISO and individual IOU planning areas. Now, we first introduced the hourly forecast last year as a tool for assessing the impact that a shifting peak hour caused by significant penetration of EVs, PV, efficiency, and time of use rates might have on peak demand. It's an important tool, but our initial attempt had a couple issues. First, we patterned the hourly forecast after a specific but relatively average year, an average weather year. But even an average year has unusual highs and lows, and those peculiarities carried through the forecast period. And second, we used different years for different IOU planning areas so that when you added them up to analyze the ISO as a whole, the loads didn't behave as you'd necessarily expect. So there was a coincidence issue. So for this update, staff developed a new method for assigning loads to particular hours. Rather than using a specific year, we used average historical loads by day type, like the first Tuesday in April or the third Saturday in October, for example. And then we made adjustments so that when you take a step back and you look at a particular month or a year, you see the kind of variance you'd expect to see. We tested this new method against historical loads and found that it produces reasonable peaks. And because we're no longer using distinct years, the coincidence issue is resolved. Now, say, for example, peak load on a system happens at 5 o'clock. That peak is going to be whatever customers are using minus whatever load is still being served by behind-the-meter PV at 5 p.m. In the summer months, that's a fair amount. If we forecast out 10 years, just assuming that that peak will continue to happen at 5 p.m., then we'll still be assuming that PV is significantly reducing peak load. But as you go further out, load modifiers, they start to change the shape of the load and they push the peak hour further into the evening. So say by the end of the forecast, the peak is happening at 7 p.m., then PV output is little to none at that time. And if we include those original peak reductions from behind the meter PV, the ones that we determined based on a assumed 5 p.m. peak hour, then we would be under forecasting peak. Our hourly model lets us forecast a more reasonable long-term peak. And as you can see here, the peak shift impact on the ISO system that I'm talking about is over 5,000 megawatts by 2030. Establishing reasonable projections for monthly peaks is an important step in ensuring that we have adequate resources available to meet demand throughout the year. Each line here represents a select year, so you can see how peaks grow differently across different months. PV production varies by season, driving down peak load in the summer, but allowing it to grow in the spring. This is another example of how we're using the hourly model and why it's important. I'm going to transition now to more general forecast results, but a little context. As part of every forecast, we produce a set of high, mid, and low demand scenarios that capture assumptions, particularly around energy efficiency policies and programs that are concrete. So we know when and how they're going to be implemented. These are our baseline scenarios. Of course, California has some ambitious energy efficiency goals, and there is a level of savings beyond what we include in the baseline scenarios that is still likely to occur, but there's less certainty about how, or about what new or expanded programs might contribute to those savings. So we have what we call additional achievable efficiency scenarios, which are load reductions consistent with our baseline, but developed separately. I said earlier that one of the reasons we do these updates is to refresh our economic projections, which really drive our forecast. If there are significant changes, if the economy takes a turn, we want to reflect that. For this update, however, we're in the less exciting situation where those economic projections have held steady, particularly in the mid case. So at the state level, we don't see much change in the updated forecast. More EVs drive up residential growth a bit, but there's some increased growth in the industrial sector, but that's offset by decreases in commercial and agriculture. So our updated baseline sales forecast reaches 287,000 gigawatt hours by 2030 in the mid case, which is a little more than 0.5% lower than what we previously projected. Our baseline peak forecast in the mid case also shows little change in growth relative to last time. If we'd grown these peaks out from the same starting point in 2018, then the difference would be difficult to see. But for that previous forecast, 2018 was a projected value, and we're using a lower value for 2018 that reflects information we now have about actual peak loads that occurred last year. By 2030, our updated peak forecast is nearly 2% lower in the mid case. For planning, it's unusual to use our baseline scenarios alone. Instead, what California's energy agencies do is agree to a set of managed forecasts, a particular baseline forecast paired with a particular additional achievable scenario, and it is the managed forecast that agencies plan to. So for most use cases, this includes the mid-baseline scenario and the mid-additional achievable scenario. When the planning is local, however, that tends to add another level of uncertainty, not just how much, but where demand reductions will actually occur. And so a lower level of additional achievable scenario is typically used. So here you can see the impact that these additional achievable scenarios have on reducing demand in the baseline forecast. What amounts to a little under 1% annual growth in the baseline for the ISO translates to a relatively flat or even a declining managed forecast. The delta between the baseline and the mid-mid managed scenarios here includes roughly 28,000 gigawatt hours of additional achievable efficiency and over 2,600 gigawatt hours of additional achievable PV, which is PV that is expected in new construction as a direct result of the Energy Commission's most recent building standards update. Additional achievable scenarios have a similar impact on peak, though even in the managed cases, peak load continues to grow. This is due in part to the peak shift impact I discussed earlier. So one of the strengths of our forecast is that it's grounded in a public stakeholder process. This year, we held 2 IEPR workshops and a number of DAWG meetings to review inputs, assumptions, methods, and results. We received guidance from JASC on an ongoing basis and participated in a number of staff-to-staff conversations, both with other agencies and with utility staff. At times, the participation was vigorous, and we appreciate all the time that stakeholders took to review our work and provide feedback. Many of the formal comments that we received were forward-looking, suggesting, for example, a review of PV profiles, of long-term CCA growth, of time-of-use rate impact assumptions, and of data sharing procedures. These are all things that we will have an opportunity to take up this year in the 2019 forecast. We did make one adjustment to our forecast for NCNC, that's Northern California, non-California ISO, based on formal comments, and then also based on additional weather and load information that SMUD provided for us. The change lowered our consumption and peak forecasts for that planning area by several percent. Typically, our forecast is accompanied by a narrative description, what we call our forecast report. I want to note that we still intend to publish that report and expect it to be available in February. Also, we are not presenting today for adoption our usual set of LSC and balancing authority forms. We hope to have some additional discussions with stakeholders before finalizing those, and we'll make them available as soon as possible. We plan to kick off the 2019 forecasting process with a workshop on January 17th. This is our economic outlook workshop. Next year's process will have a preliminary revised framework, which should allow plenty of opportunity to review inputs, assumptions, and methods with stakeholders, and also to engage on several of the issues that I just described. And lastly, I'd like to thank all of the staff who supported this forecast update. There were many, and recognize specifically the efforts of Carrie Garcia, Sudhakar Kanala, and Chris Kavalak, who worked quite a few long hours on this forecast update and also prioritized stakeholder communication. And so I will conclude my presentation by recommending that the Commission adopt this update to the California Energy Demand 2018 to 2030 forecast.
Thank you. Let's go to public comment. Let's start, obviously, comments from those in the room. Kaliso?
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Delphine Ho from the California ISO, and I'm here to absolutely support adoption of this item and also to convey our sincere appreciation to the Commission and the incredible staff for developing, especially the hourly forecast for use in our transmission planning processes, but also ultimately for generation procurement. So the hourly granularity for us is absolutely critical in the ability to understand how we can manage the grid reliably so that we can meet the state's energy policies. We really think that the forecast is incredibly important as a core foundation for process alignment between the Commission, the CAISO, and ultimately the California Public Utilities Commission. So we want to actually extend our sincere thank you to Chris Gavalik, who spent many, many hours working very closely with us. We hope that he can go on Christmas break right after this. And also to Nick Fugate, Kerry Garcia, and also Siva Gunda for his incredible leadership. So again, thank you, and we highly support this item.
Thank you. Any other comments from anyone in the room? Then let's go to the telephone line. Maybe Simons.
Yes, do you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Simon Baker, Deputy Director of Energy Division of the California Public Utilities Commission. I, too, want to express our support for adoption of the forecast. As was noted in the staff presentation, this forecast is very important for the CPUC in a number of different resource planning processes, integrated resource planning, distributed resource planning. That's a new function for the IEPR forecast in distributed resource planning, so we're looking forward to the application of that, and then also in resource adequacy. I want to recognize the good collaboration that we've had between the agencies. This dates back more than a decade of really intensified collaborations. That's been very good, and this IEPR update cycle has been no exception. CEC staff really worked extremely hard on this work product. It was an unusually big scope for an update cycle. Things that are not typically done during an IEPR update cycle, like updating the PV and EV adoption projections, were done. In particular, we at PUC, we appreciate the work that was done to update the time of use assumptions, and most importantly, the work done to produce monthly peak forecasts, which are now based on a refined hourly model. We appreciate that this has been brought into the IEPR process, and we anticipate using the results in our resource adequacy proceeding. We're aware that staff work nights and weekends, want to recognize the diligent efforts of Siva Gunda, Nick Fugate, Chris Kavalik, Kerry Garcia, and others. And also just note that we really appreciate the adherence to the schedule as another regulatory agent subject to the pressures of getting deliverables, complex deliverables out on time, and also taking stakeholder comment. We know how it can be a challenge sometimes to do that, and want to appreciate the work that was done to adhere to the schedule. So on behalf of the CPUC, I just want to thank all of you at the Energy Commission for this good work, and we support adoption.
Great, thank you. Anyone else, either in the room or on the phone? And then let's transition over to the commissioners. I'll say a few words, and I think Commissioner McAllister will probably have some comments too. Obviously, this is one of the key Energy Commission tasks is the demand forecast, which is then used by the other agencies in the state for planning. So it's really important we do this well. We've done it for decades. But we're really facing more complexity at this point. As you heard, there's a lot of focus on disaggregating the forecast both spatially to get more disaggregated, even down to the distribution level, and temporally to get more to hourly. And at the same time, there's a lot of technology changes that are quite significant with behind the meter photovoltaics and electric vehicles, and also climate change. So again, it's something which is certainly challenging to deal with. As people indicated, this was an unusual cycle in that I think for the next I'm going to say few years, for both photovoltaics and electric vehicles and ultimately CCAs. We're looking more at an annual update as opposed to trying to forecast what's going on for the next, 5 years on that. But again, it's really a time for a lot of challenges in terms of just dealing with an opportunity, a lot of opportunities for our staff to really rethink some of the pieces and to really bring into place new tools. So again, really want to thank people for that activity. And at the same time, trying to deal with the realities of scheduling in terms of the other agencies. That's why we have a slightly different approach this year of getting out the basic numbers with reports to come, so that the PUC can start building the numbers in. So again, thanks everyone for the activities on this. Commissioner McAllister?
Yeah, I think with challenge comes opportunity. so I'm incredibly optimistic, actually, because I think we have a great team in place, and I think you heard that in the comments. Siva, Nick, Carrie, Chris, Sudhakar, and just the whole group, I think, are rising to this challenge, and it is a challenge. A lot more data. We're in 2019 now. We're more data is both an opportunity and requires a big effort. I think there are going to be all sorts of corollary benefits of putting in place the analytical tools that we need for the forecast. I think we're going to be able to ask all sorts of other questions that are related, and dig into the details of locales and load shapes, demand shapes. I think there's just a lot of upside to this big lift that we're all doing. It's going to really be worth it. Already is worth it, but I think it's going to emerge as being incredibly valuable increasingly over time. I wanted to just thank really the engagement by the PUC staff and also ISO on this, particularly around the RA issue that we've been working through and incorporating that into the forecast. In particular, Keith and Delphine from the ISO and Simon and crew from the PUC. And also Commissioner Randolph. I think the leadership at the commissioner level at the PUC has been great. And so building kind of a superstructure of oversight, I guess, but really sort of guidance and direction at the commissioner level is increasingly necessary as this complexity emerges as well. And so I think staff has been incredibly open to that and very, very helpful at all the agencies. And it's been a really good foundational year for this effort. So as the chair said, I think there's kind of no way around having more significant efforts happen in the off years of the IEPR, and this is sort of a first major example of that, but it probably will continue as we confront all these challenges. New questions come up, and we have to tweak things a little bit more iteratively. But I'm really happy with where this landed, and I want to just again thank all the staff. All right. So we'll move item 5.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So item 5 passes 5-0. Thank you. So now we'll go to item 2. And I'm just going to a few words on the process for item 2. Item 2, small power plant exemption for McClellan backup generating facility project. The commission will consider and act to approve or deny the petition for reconsideration followed by Helping Hand Tools. Before we begin hearing from the parties, I'd like to explain the process. Because Helping Hand Tools is the moving party, it will present its arguments first, followed by the project applicant and then the commission staff. Helping Hand Tools will have the final say and reply to the other party's arguments. Each party will have up to 10 minutes for opening argument, and Helping Hand Tools will have up to 5 minutes for its reply argument. The commissioners may ask questions during and after the arguments. Once parties' arguments have concluded, the commissioners will go into closed session as specified in item 2 of the agenda, which provides notice of a possible closed session for deliberation pursuant to Government Code Section 11126C3. We will take public comments on this item before going into closed session. Before the arguments begin, we would like the parties to introduce themselves for the record, starting with Helping Hand Tools.
This is Robert Sarvey on behalf of Helping Hand Tools. Scott Galati, representing Vantage Data Centers.
Spencer Myers, Senior Director of Construction with Vantage Data Centers.
Good morning, Lisa DiCarlo, Energy Commission Staff Attorney. With me is Leonidas Payne, Energy Commission Project Manager. And on the phone is Jared Babula, also Energy Commission Staff Attorney, who was assigned to the project, and he is available in case detailed questions arise.
Great. We're now ready to hear from Helping Hand Tools.
Thank you, Commissioners. The decision makes an error in that it equates the annual emissions calculated from the project for 50 hours with the air quality impacts from the project for 50 hours. They're not the same. The decision claims on page 14 that NO2 air quality impacts have been evaluated with all generators operating for 50 hours per year. That's not so. According to the decision, those 50 hours of modeling adequately address the potential for air quality impacts from 19 hours of emergency operations. Once again, annual emissions have been quantified. Air quality impacts have not been modeled for 50 years. If you take a look at the evidence on page 5-3.9 of the initial study, it states, with one engine running, for comparison with the National Ambient Air Quality Standards and California Ambient Air Quality Standards, the most conservative hourly emission rate was used, assuming 1 hour of testing at 100% load. There has been no testing of these generators simultaneously over 50 hours or even together. Only one generator has been modeled for 1 hour. That's it. So, also, the evidence on page 5.3-11 of the approved mitigated declaration for the project states the emergency generators would only be tested for 4 hours annually and 5 minutes monthly, a total of 5 hours per year. However, the operation of a pair of generators with one located above the other or both having the same stack exit could cause 8 hours of operation from 2 generators to impact a given receptor location and result in a significant impact for the 98th percentile, 8th highest value for the National Ambient Air Quality Standard. We know from the evidence that a 19-hour outage has occurred at Vantage's other Santa Clara data center. So the evidence doesn't support the decision's conclusion that there will be no significant air quality impact from operation of 47 diesel generators operating at one time, because it's never been modeled. What the impact would be from all the 47 generators operating at once again, has not been analyzed. According to CEC staff's reply on 2HT's petition for reconsideration, the only time all generators might be possibly running at the same time would be if there was an emergency scenario. But there is no condition in this decision or in Santa Clara's mitigated declaration that would not allow them to fire all 47 generators up at once anytime they want to. As the Vantage press release I provided you, I hope you had a chance to review it, demonstrates on April 26, 2017, Vantage operated all 30 3-megawatt generators at once at their other data center project located 2 miles away from the McLaren project. This was shortly before the CEC staff incorrectly concluded that the other data center, Santa Clara 1, should not be subject to Energy Commission jurisdiction despite the fact that the data center has 75 megawatts of load. As far as the potential generating capacity of the McLaren data center, Vantage's press releases claims that they're going to have 3 on-site 50 megawatt substations at this project. I'll let you explain to them why they need 3. 2HT also believes that the SPPE process requires the CEC to engage the environmental justice community in processing this permit. We understand you disagree, but we must continue to point out the federal and state environmental justice responsibilities. And thank you.
Thank you. Applicant?
Thank you, Commissioner Scott Galati. I filed a response to the petition for reconsideration, and I'd like to break it into 3 pieces. First, what the Commission should be deciding is there an error of fact or law, or is there any new evidence that could not have been raised during the hearings that the Commission had here that would warrant us stepping back and reconsidering the decision. To put this in perspective, The Energy Commission made a decision exempting this project. The Air District has issued the ATCs. The generators have been delivered to the site and are sitting on the site now. The demolition has been completed for phase 1. The city has issued its foundation permit for phase 1, and that construction is ongoing. The substation is being built by Silicon Valley Power. This was made clear to the committee at the time, that we were under a very tight time frame to be able to meet our requirements, and that we were going to go to construction as soon as we could, and we've done that. The pieces I want to separate into two is what you may have in front of you, what was docketed this morning, what Mr. Sarvey just talked about before, is a document from 2017. You can reject it based on the petition for reconsideration, because Mr. Sarvey could have brought this evidence to the committee and we could have had a conversation about it. I'm happy to address it should the commission want. However, I think you should just reject it. If you don't reject it on those grounds, you could reject it on the grounds that he was supposed to file any reply he had on January 4th. He didn't. So luckily, I had my phone on during the other items and I was able to read this document. We are prepared to address it should you want us to address it. The second piece, and the primary piece that I think you should focus on, is that, and I'll let staff address the issue of whether a small power plant exemption could even allow this petition for reconsideration. My reply, I support staff. I do not believe we should be here, that there is no petition for reconsideration opportunity under your regulations or the statute for a small power plant exemption. But if you do consider this petition, this intervener has been very involved in this project. Nothing in his petition for reconsideration is not been raised in writing multiple times. For example, the generating capacity issue, there's no fewer than 8 documents filed by Helping Hand Tools repeating the exact same arguments. We talked about it at both evidentiary hearings where the exact same arguments were made. We came to the business meeting where the exact same objection was made. I don't think we need to continue anymore on generating capacity, and you would send a very strong message to the rest of the interveners that petitions for reconsideration are not another bite at the apple. They are not for rehashing. They are only for that new evidence that you couldn't have obtained during the hearing or some error. So let me address the error. Mr. Sarvey equates modeling with evaluation. He creates NO2 modeling with analysis. What you heard from your staff and from the applicant was that modeling NO2 impacts during an emergency wouldn't give you the appropriate information due to the uncertainty of what the background criteria would be. What the analysis that we believe you relied on in the final decision was that not individual modeling, but the fact that NOx emissions are offset. Now, let me just take a step back, because while the commission during AFC proceedings looks at things from a CEQA perspective, looks at things for compliance with LOR's perspective, may have done a much more in-depth analysis. But other agencies who implement CEQA don't always model, for example, for NO2 impacts. In fact, this project, with its 32 generators, which was the original iteration of this project, went through CEQA review at the city of Santa Clara, where none of that modeling was required for them to determine that there was no significant impact. So really what's happening is Mr. Sarvey said, this is how you should do it. The committee heard that and chose not to. That's not an error of law. That's not an error of fact. That's a disagreement that was discussed. We had probably an hour of an evidentiary hearing on this subject alone, where our experts were there. So this is not the time to redo that. You can feel very comfortable that The committee and then ultimately the commission considered all of these arguments, and there is nothing new. Lastly, I would like you to send a very strong message that not only should petitions like this not be brought for a small power plant exemption, but there has to be finality. People are making decisions, large financial decisions, on that finality. And that's what this client has done. They followed the rules. We came here, we resolved our issues, and we had no disagreement with staff. And now we have air permits, and we're in the middle of construction. So please, in your closed session, come back quickly and deny this petition for reconsideration.
Mr. Galati,
Yes.
I'm not going to rule on whether or not we're accepting the document, but just in case, I'd like you to respond to it, which would get it potentially in the record and give Mr. Sarvia a chance to respond to your response so we have a complete. Again, we may or may not decide to let it in, but
I'm happy to do that. So Commissioner, I'll give the overview if I can, and if we need any additional detail, Mr. Myers is here and can provide that. So there are two campuses. The McLaren campus, which is the small power plant exemption that you identified, is a build from the ground up by Vantage. The other campus was a campus that it bought and had been built in different piecemeal, so to speak, and expansions over a period of time. That was not designed in the same way that McLaren has been designed. And so what they've been able to do before was to test individual buildings. In 2017, they chose to shut down the facility and test if it all worked together. That was unique to that campus. It is not what we have with McLaren. It will not be done for McLaren, and therefore it is absolutely irrelevant to anything that you're discussing. In addition, the 150 megawatt substation is, just like everything else that Vantage has done, is about providing redundancy. There is another 50 megawatt transformer should one break. The committee is well aware that Silicon Valley Power can only deliver, under our agreement, up to 100 megawatts, not 150. We have also agreed that the rules would require us, if we expanded beyond 100 megawatts, to come back and have a conversation with the commission. The commission included a condition of approval, which we think is unnecessary and maybe not enforceable in the same way that the committee does. It doesn't matter. We've told the city that we would take a condition, and the city will include such a condition. So everything Mr. Sarvia has said about this new document is irrelevant, and again, trying to keep your eye off the prize, which is what is his grounds and what does he need to prove to win in a petition for reconsideration, even if one is allowed. So thank you, Commissioners.
Staff?
Thank you, Lisa DiCarlo. On December 20th, 2018, Energy Commission staff submitted a reply to Helping Hand Tools petition for reconsideration, and I'll just quickly summarize the gist of our response. Staff recommends the Energy Commission deny Helping Hand Tools petition for reconsideration on the basis that the Energy Commission's statutory and regulatory provisions do not provide for reconsideration of small power plant exemption determinations. Once granted, a small power plant exemption exempts a project from all provisions in Chapter 6 of the Warren-Alquist Act, including Section 25530, the provision that would otherwise allow the Energy Commission to order reconsideration of decisions or orders made under the chapter. This is a plain reading of the statute, but there is also a practical reason for reaching this conclusion. A Commission decision on exemption is not the final step before project approval. It is simply one step in a long process, a long public process, allowing a project to subsequently go before all other state, local, and regional entities that the Energy Commission would ordinarily stand in the shoes of to seek applicable permits. In this case, McLaren will need to obtain permits from both the City of Santa Clara and the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. Understanding this limited rule, our regulations provide for an expedited process to consider small power plant exemption applications within ideally 135 days. To read into this process an automatic delay of an extra 30 days for a petition for reconsideration, with the potential for an extra 90 days or even more on top of that if the Energy Commission agrees to consider reconsideration, would result in potentially doubling the amount of time originally called for in processing the application. The potential for such a delay does not seem reasonable for a decision where the Energy Commission has determined that it will not issue a permit for the project and that instead the project will need to seek its permits from the various other entities with jurisdiction and comply with those public processes. Allowing for reconsideration in this situation also has the potential to create confusion as to when exactly these other entities may exercise their jurisdiction. And Mr. Galati has provided some detail about how that affects McLaren at this point. Even if reconsideration were provided for here, however, petitioner has not met the burden required to show that it is warranted. Reconsideration is only warranted where a petitioner can show that there is new evidence or an error of fact or change or error of law. On page 2 of the petition, Helping Hand Tools itself admits that the matter it raises in the petition, matters that it raises, were raised before in the proceeding. And both staff's and the project owner's responses to the petition provide a thorough accounting of where in the record these issues have previously been raised and addressed, as has Mr. Galati's presentation today. Therefore, petitioner has failed to meet its burden, even if the Commission were to determine that reconsideration was appropriate in an SPP process. For all of these reasons, staff recommends denial of the petition, and we are available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Mr. Sarvey?
Yes. Obviously, for us to take this issue to court, we have to exhaust our administrative remedies. In order to do so, we have to give you an opportunity to look at the facts, which I've outlined. And without that, we're just going to get thrown out of court. So this is your opportunity to change your mind when I have demonstrated to you that you're looking at the wrong issue. You're looking at the annual emissions from this thing as opposed to the modeling, the 1 hour NO2 impact from these generators running. And that's been muddled. I've been in contact with the Air District. To my knowledge, no permit has been issued to this project, and to my knowledge, they haven't even provided a permit to the Air District for 47 generators. They do have one for 32, but I do not believe it's been approved. So if you make no changes today to this reconsideration, you must include a condition preventing them from running these things simultaneously just to test them like they did here at their other Vantage data center. That is absolutely wrong. To test 47 diesel generators. They can test them one at a time. They can find out all their issues. There is no reason to turn on 47 diesel generators just to test. So I would ask you, if nothing else in this reconsideration, provide a condition that prevents that from happening. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there any public comment from anyone in the room? Any public comment from anyone on the line? Okay, now the Commission will now go into closed session. We'll return to open session. I'm going to say about noon. Maybe, I can't say we've had a great track record on, this aspect of our forecast, but we'll let you know when we're back. We're back on the record after deliberating in closed session. We'll now vote on the petition for reconsideration. Is there a motion?
Yes, there's a motion. I move that the commission deny the petition for reconsideration on the grounds that Helping Hand Tools has not presented any new evidence that, despite the diligence of the moving party, could not have been produced during the evidentiary hearings in the case, or that the final decision adopted November 7th, 2018 contains an error in fact or change or error in law. Petitioner has not established that the document presented today, dated May 17th, 2017, could not have been submitted previously. I further move that we continue this item to the end of the business meeting to give the Chief Counsel's Office time to prepare a proposed order consistent with this motion and the Commission's deliberations and present it for our consideration and approval.
Second?
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. This motion passes 5-0. We'll continue this item. We'll be back in session at 1. And at that point, we're hoping that the Chief Counsel's Office can distribute a proposed decision. Then we will consider that proposed decision after items 6, 7, and 8. Presumably that will give people sufficient time to review it, including us. And so we'll be back at that stage. 1 o'clock decision, and then we'll vote on it or consider it after the 6, 7, and 8.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we're back in session. Please.
Good afternoon, Chair and Commission. Returning to item 2 that you had asked that an order be prepared. An order on the petition for reconsideration has been placed on the dais for all of your review. I've also presented copies of that same draft to Mr. Galati and to Mr. Carlo. I've not seen Mr. Sarvi in order to present one to him. I did give additional copies to the public advisor to provide, and it will be available on the screen on the P drive for purposes for later discussion. My understanding is that this matter will be brought back after item 8 for action.
Thank you. Let's go to item number 6.
Good afternoon, Chair Weisenmiller and Commissioners. I'm Al Alvarado. I'm a Program Manager in the Siting, Transmission, and Environmental Protection Division. I'm here to present a proposed resolution seeking your approval for a second interagency agreement between the California Public Utilities Commission and the Energy Commission. The first interagency agreement, which was approved by the Public Utilities Commission and the Energy Commission back in 2017, which has the Energy Commission staff providing technical support for preparing California Environmental Quality Act documents for infrastructure regulatory applications. The siting division is completing one transmission line analysis that we prepared for the Public Utilities Commission and is currently working on a second project. The second interagency agreement includes technical services required for resource planning, studies, energy infrastructure project evaluations, and analytical support for Federal Energy Regulatory Commission proceedings. We have been working closely with Energy Division staff to identify the different types of analysis that they could use from help with the Energy Commission staff. And we've identified a scope of work that's in the draft interagency agreement, which would involve electric and natural gas system simulation modeling. We would also include assessments for energy infrastructure projects, evaluations of alternatives and costs for transmission projects, land use and environmental screening analysis of proposed infrastructure projects, and also geographic information system applications. The staff in the Siting Division and the Energy Assessments Division has the technical skills and years of related experience to conduct the types of studies identified by the PUC. The CPUC will reimburse the Energy Commission for these technical services up to $1 million over a 3-year period. And we believe that this second interagency agreement is a positive step towards continued collaboration with the PUC. So with that, we're thereby seeking your approval of this resolution and interagency agreement.
Thank you. Let's start it. Is there any public comment from anyone in the room? How about on the phone? Okay, so let's transition over to the commissioners. I'm at least going to start by indicating this is an effort that President Picker and I started a while back, where we could provide assistance to the PUC in some of the environmental review, which would certainly help them deal with some of their workload issues and certainly also help us to address some of our issues here. So it's been good that it's been successful, and now looking at expansion. Certainly when the Governor's Military Affairs Council met in August, they talked about a particular gas pipeline project that was important to them.
Yeah, I'll just add, I really appreciate Chair Weisenmiller and President Picker's leadership on this collaboration with the PUC. I think that it's definitely a win-win for both of our agencies. The PUC is getting some very strong access to some very strong analytical capability here at the Energy Commission. It's absolutely an efficient way for us to work together, and it's a way for us to help solve problems and do analyses that are very relevant to both of our agencies. And so I'm in strong support of this. I'm very pleased to see the staff here and at the PUC step up and take advantage of this collaboration and build on it. Are there other comments on this?
I was just going to make the observation that I know the employee union leader, approached me and certainly remind me generally of the fact that, when we do contracts, we cannot contract for things that can be done by state civil servants. And so certainly that applies in this condition too, right?
All right, very good. So I'll move approval of item 6.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
This passes 5-0. Thanks.
Thank you.
Let's go on to item 7.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Rachel Salazar, and I work with the Energy Research and Development Division. I'm here seeking approval of 4 new grant agreements that resulted from an EPIC solicitation titled Bringing Rapid Innovation Development to Green Energy, or BRIDGE for short. BRIDGE provides follow-on funding to the most promising early-stage technologies that received previous funding award from an eligible federal funding agency or Energy Commission research program. The solicitation stems from ongoing coordination with the DOE's ARPA-E program and allows startup companies to continue development of their technologies without having to wait years for a topic-specific solicitation to be released. And I'll provide a brief overview of the 4 projects now. The first agreement is with Lucent Optics to further develop and test a flexible panel that diffuses light more optimally. These panels are made from an ultra-thin plastic and contain strips of LEDs that reflect light across the panel. The lightweight, flexible design allows panels to be incorporated into flat or curved surfaces or to be used as standalone luminaires. They can also be wrapped around objects for a more unique lighting display. By increasing the amount of lumens per watt, less luminaires are needed, providing both energy and cost savings. The panels are also easier and cheaper to install, especially in new construction office spaces. For example, by replacing the traditional lighting troffers with these panels, box-type housing for fluorescent and LED lamps would no longer be needed. Lucent will work to complete development and scale up the panels to meet traditional linear large area fixture sizes. They will also reduce production costs to stimulate greater adoption of solid-state lighting.
Could we ask questions as you go? Just a real
Sure.
quick, what's the expected life cycle of the product?
Oh goodness, Spencer here.
Do you know, Eric, offhand? For
we would have to probably go back to the proposal to see if that information was included, or ask the recipient or the applicant if they have that information.
Eric, identify yourself for the record.
I'm sorry, Eric Stokes, Manager for the Energy Deployment and Market Facilitation Office, Living Research and Development Division.
In the second agreement, Ubiquitous Energy will continue development of their innovative glass coating technology to offer a more dynamic window product that will generate electricity and reduce heat gains. Similar products offer consumers a reduction in heat gains but are expensive and have unfavorable color tints. Additionally, none of them utilize the solar heat being reflected away to generate energy for on-site usage. The Clearview Power technology is a solar-producing coating that can be applied directly to windows. By absorbing both ultraviolet and infrared light, the technology can lower HVAC demands by up to 30%. What's more, Ubiquitous has achieved color neutrality in the coating, allowing consumers a more natural aesthetic. Ubiquitous achieved early success in applying their coating on a 6x6 piece of glass, and they are now looking to develop new processing techniques for integrating the technology into standard window manufacturing, scaling up to produce 14x20 prototypes. These will be tested to ensure they meet commercially viable levels of durability, energy savings, electricity generation, and aesthetics.
So I actually have the same question about this. Do you know the expected life cycle for this?
I think we can look back at what they've been able to prototype on their 6x6 glass panel. they've gotten up to 96% yields through their current testing on the 6x6. Part of what this project is going to try to do is kind of establish some of those. How long will this technology hold up? Specifically, will it meet kind of the specifications you need for the window market? And that's part of the testing that we're hoping as part of the project.
Yeah, the reason I ask is for some of the film applications, they can have pretty poor degradation ratios. I mean, you can test that in the ovens, weather test and stuff. And it is a concern I have that you may have great performance in year 1, 2, 3 that then drops off pretty precipitously. So just going forward, I mean, it'd be great to get estimates on this kind of thing. That's a question I really think we should be looking at, because it's not just the initial performance. It's the, for example, with crystalline PV in glass, like we know that's a 25-year warranty product, right? But the other, it's been kind of the Achilles heel when people have tried this before. And I think there's been some steps forward, but it'd be great to to know more. Yeah.
In the third agreement, Heliotrope Technologies will demonstrate another dynamic window product. Their electrochromic windows overcome common limitations to broader market penetration, such as high costs, unfavorable aesthetics, and a lack of controls allowing windows to properly respond to occupant and building needs throughout seasonal climates. Heliotrope's nanocrystal technology is a low-cost solution that overcomes all of those limitations. The windows can be customized to reach different transparency levels for optimal heat gain and insulation performance, and are offered in a neutral gray tint. Heliotrope aims to achieve a price point below $25 per square foot, which is well below the $50 to $80 price range for electrochromic windows, and cost competitive with other dynamic window products. Heliotrope will further develop their control algorithms before installing advanced prototypes at sites, including Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, where field monitoring can validate energy savings and ensure consumer acceptance before commercialization. And in the last agreement, Glint Photonics will approach lighting efficiency with a different metric. Typically, when we think about increasing lumens per watt to increase efficiency. But with light utilization, you can target light to where it's most needed, rather than lighting an entire space. Glint provides a low-profile luminaire product line that can be mounted stationary and are capable of projecting beams that can be steered and broadened as needed. For this project, Glint will develop the software control systems to enhance their products and enable remote adjusting, eliminating the need for time-consuming and unsafe manual adjustments whenever a scene change is needed. They will also further develop 2 luminaires that incorporate the automated controls, one for spaces with high ceilings, needing only periodic adjustments, such as car dealerships and art galleries, and one with motion sensor tracking intended for advanced task lighting. Both products will be provided for less than $200 and should achieve at least 25% energy savings over conventional luminaires. And that concludes my presentation today. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great. So first, is there any public comment, either in the room or on the phone? Okay, great. So again, transitioning back to the commissioners, then, this is an exciting new approach Bridge has been, and we've had a long relationship with RPE, actually before we even got the authorization to restart. Cheryl Martin who was then head of RPE, was a big supporter, and we signed our agreement for state to have a relationship with RPE on the technology side. Their relationship to what we do, they tend to be more in the early stage, although interesting enough, they focus a lot on to market parts, and also focus a lot on, hopefully more on home runs than incremental improvements. But we've found over time that there's a lot of back and forth. There are times where they work on a project in California, which then becomes something that becomes part of our stable. And we've also had ones where we have done something and somehow then it ends up in their stable, in spite of the fact we're sort of somewhat further along we thought. So basically they're looking for healthy synergies there, and certainly continue to try to learn from what they're doing, and that they try to work with us on what we're doing, and vice versa. So it's been pretty good. As we struggle, I mean, obviously trying to take ideas from lab to market, is always hard. And as Commissioner Hochschild pointed out, there's always questions like, okay, looks great. Now what happens is you put it out in the field, and how long is it going to last, or what's its performance going to be over time? But anyway, it's good for us to continue to deepen the relationship with them, even though obviously at this point it's changed from something through our relationship where they've really made a marquee early on, and at this point I think they would rather not tell other people in the Trump administration that they know us. But anyway, we're still working together pretty well.
I got a great briefing from staff on this, and I wanted to note that the approach is also very exciting to me on this. I like the name for Bridge, and the idea that we can find more efficient and effective ways to leverage other funding pots that are available by having a funding pot like this one that allows us to align schedules and timelines so that you don't have maybe an ARPA-E grant, and then it takes 9 months for us to develop a solicitation around something, and then a year later they get awarded and you have these gaps between funding. It's another fantastic idea that I've told the EPIC team I'd like to bring into the ARFETP as well, so I think the funding approach here is really great as well. And I will
Yeah, I just wanted, as always, I've got my eye on the building standards, even though we just finished a cycle. But there are a couple of great technologies that have a lot of potential if they pan out, and but this is how it starts, right? It's having a good technology that we can then maybe have as a voluntary, compliance path, and then eventually, if it really pans out to be, durable and robust and market ready, then we can potentially, 10 years down the line, put it in the mandatory code. So it's all good for progress. So thanks. I'll move this item.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. This passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Before we go into 8, I was going to ask the public advisor if she could email a copy of the proposed decision to Mr. Sarvey. That's nice.
Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Josh Croft from the Research and Development Division. I am here today to request approval of 4 awards totaling $1.8 million from the Electric Program Investment Charges Small Grant Program, the CalSeed Initiative. CalSeed provides small grants to entrepreneurs with early-stage clean energy technologies. Applicants first apply for $150,000 concept awards, which also come with access to technical resources and business development expertise. Those that successfully receive concept awards are then eligible to compete for $450,000 additional dollars to further develop their innovation. The awards under consideration today are the first of those $450,000 prototype awards. The prototype awards are given to CalSeed Concept Award recipients who have shown the greatest technical and commercial potential. This determination is made through a business plan competition, where the CalSeed entrepreneurs take the results of their previous CalSeed Concept Award, as well as business case information they developed during a CalSeed-sponsored entrepreneurial bootcamp. They pitch their case to a panel of judges who evaluate for technology impact, business strategy, and the expertise and experience of the team. The first Prototype Award business plan competition took place in October 2018, and the companies with the top 4 scores are presented here for your approval. The 4 companies with the highest scores are CodeCycle, PowerFlex Systems, Nativus, and Sepion Technologies. The first company, CodeCycle, has a software platform that converts energy code compliance activities from a paper-based system to an easy-to-use software interface. Targeted users are building designers, contractors, and building inspectors. The software allows designers to determine compliance in real time, and during construction, inspectors know which inspection areas save the most energy and can prioritize accordingly. The goal here is to make code compliance easier during design and to guide the inspection process during construction. Currently, the software is being piloted in 6 cities and covers the commercial lighting portion of the code. The prototype award will allow the team to expand code coverage to include items such as the building envelope, HVAC, and the residential energy standards. They are also looking to partner with additional cities. The next company, Nativis, has a new design for room air conditioners that is significantly more efficient and lighter. Conventional HVAC design loses efficiency due to an insulating air boundary layer that lowers the system's ability to move heat. Nativis's innovative design combines the heat exchanger surface, the motor, and the compressor with the fan, creating a single rotating design that addresses the boundary layer problem. At lab scale, Nativis has seen a 50% power reduction compared to commercially available ACs of similar size, while being able to provide similar cooling capacity. With the Prototype Award, Nativis will move development of their technology to the prototype scale and will conduct further component and system level validation, ultimately seeking third-party validation and testing, and certification, excuse me. The next company is PowerFlex. Facilities that adopt EV charging can see their peak energy loads increase significantly, which increases their bills and the strain to the grid. PowerFlex has developed a software platform that jointly optimizes multiple levels of EV charging, solar PV generation, energy storage, customer preferences, and building load. During the Concept Award, PowerFlex implemented a real-time adaptive charging system that focused on level 2 charging. They found that they could reduce peak load charging by more than 40% while still meeting customer charging demands. With the Prototype Award, PowerFlex Systems will develop and pilot a system that can jointly optimize level 2 and level 3 charging on the same electrical infrastructure in a way that is still optimal for solar generation and building load, balancing these sometimes conflicting objectives while reducing peak demand charges. Sepion Technologies, the last company before you today, has developed a battery membrane that can enable market adoption of higher energy density batteries. In batteries, lithium metal anodes offer higher energy densities than traditional graphite anodes, but are held back by ceramic membrane technologies, which have not been able to be produced cheaply at scale. Sepion has developed a new composite membrane which will provide the same protection to the lithium metal battery and the same performance, but can be produced in a roll-to-roll process, resulting in lower costs and the ability to easily scale into existing manufacturing. During the Concept Award, Sepion demonstrated their membrane's ability to protect the lithium metal battery and maintain performance. With the Prototype Award, the team will scale up production volume with roll-to-roll manufacturing while demonstrating that the enhanced performance and protection demonstrated at the small scale is still there. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. First, are there any comments from anyone in the room? On the line? Okay. So again, I'll start the conversation at least. As you indicated, this is the Prototype Awards, which is, again, I think we all felt really good about giving out some small checks to small companies to get some of their ideas along. This is taking it to the next step on hopefully the more successful ones. I think certainly this is an interesting suite of technologies, and I think all of us are looking forward to what the results look like.
Yeah. If I could just add on to your comments, Mr. Chairman. I was with Eric Stokes, 6-8 months ago when a number of these companies presented at the Innovation Forum for the CalC program in San Francisco, and it's great to see these companies come back. I just really want to validate this model. I confess I was a little bit skeptical when we started this because the initial grants are so small. As I questioned, $150,000, is that enough to even do anything meaningful? But what I think is clear is it becomes a lever to raise other money and to get the kind of support and interest and sort of mentoring that entrepreneurs need. It's a real seal of approval. And then I have to say, we're here approving. I just added up, $15 million of grants today. And this, all these look spectacular. You know, we're here at a moment when the federal government is shut down. Like, we're not functioning as a country, but as a state, we're doing this, and this is all, you know, these are going to be the technologies and industries of the future. And I'm just really proud to see this progress. And I really want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for pushing as you have on this. I mean, this is I think this is like the crown jewel of what we're doing now, is investing in the technologies that are going to power our future. I really want to thank all the staff who've been working so hard on this. Just a terrific array of companies. So, yeah, happy to move the item when you're ready.
Actually, hold on 1 second. I mean, normally I never do this, but, you know, never say never. So, unfortunately, CalSAF's participant here has happened to step out just as we were dealing with this, and has been sitting around all day long. So please come up, although, again, never, never again. You know, the idea is people have a chance to say something, and then they stop, and then we discuss it.
My apologies, commissioners. I just wanted to take this opportunity to introduce myself. I'm Tenley Dahlstrom. I'm the Director of California Programs at the California Clean Energy Fund. And the CalSAF team is very excited to be here today to recommend and celebrate CodeCycle, Nativus, PowerFlex Systems, and Sepion Technologies as our first group of CalSeed prototype awardees. These companies were selected through a rigorous process, as Josh mentioned, of a business plan competition and pitch sessions conducted in strong partnership with the Clean Tech Open West and the help of judges who graciously volunteered their time and expertise. These 4 companies exemplify the diversity and ingenuity of the state's clean energy entrepreneurs, and we look forward to supporting their efforts to bring their innovations to commercialization. We'd like to thank our partners at Clean Tech Open West for the critical part they play in supporting the CalSeed program. We'd also like to thank the judges, volunteers, and technical advisory committee members for their expertise, guidance, and commitment to this effort. Finally, I'd like to thank personally our Energy Commission partners, who include Joshua Croft, Anthony Ng, and Eric Stokes, who've championed this program and worked with our team to bring it to fruition. We deeply appreciate the opportunity to support the growth of the clean energy economy in California and the benefits it provides to the citizens of the state. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Commissioner, you want to make a motion now? Well, actually, first, does anyone else have a comment? No.
I move the item with enthusiasm.
Okay.
Second, with equal enthusiasm.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. This passes 5-0. Thank you. Now we're going to go to back to item 2. And I think we may have lost a hearing advisor who she's mailing out to. Yes. Well, he's helping the public. We're at item 2 now.
Oh, I'm so
Okay.
sorry.
That's fine.
My apologies. As stated, we presented a proposed draft of an order on the petition for reconsideration. One thing I wanted to make sure that we noted was that this order is predicated on the Commission's regulations as they existed at the time that the request for reconsideration was received. On January 1st of this year, new regs took effect. So this is based on the regs in place at the time. Also, I would like to in reviewing this, I noted that I made 3 typographical errors, and so I have corrected the Scrivener's errors, and it is available on the P drive if we could pop it up. First of all, on page 2 in the first paragraph of section 2 of the analysis, the word section should be capitalized in the second line. Also, the footnote on page number 2, number 12 should read section 1720, not section 1001 and following. And finally, the footnote on page 3, number 18 should delete the see also reference TN-PDF. So what's available on screen is the final version with those errors corrected. So
Okay.
With that, my understanding is that Mr. Sarvey is no longer here. The Public Advisor's Office will be emailing a copy of this to him.
Okay.
So.
And it is the corrected version?
Yes.
Okay. And for first, are there any public comment on this proposed decision? Either in the room or on the line? Among the parties, or first parties, excuse me. Let's start with, I was going to say, well, the applicant is gone, so then we go to staff.
Lisa DiCarlo, I do appreciate the clarification that the decision is predicated on the pre-existing regulations and not our new ones. I think that'll be helpful going forward. And staff has no further comments on the order.
Okay. Don't see.
So Chair Weismiller, this is Courtney Vaccaro. I think during the break, I was present when Mr. Galati was commenting on the order, so he did have an opportunity to take a look at it. He did review it.
Okay.
It was the one prior to the scrivener's errors being corrected, but substantively he saw the content. And my recollection is he had a comment, but it really wasn't substantive, so maybe we'll share
correct. The comment he made was the way that we had referred to the intervener helping hand tool, like tools he thought that perhaps we had made them plural instead of singular, but I pointed out that we had coined helping hand at the beginning of the document, so it's helping hand tool.
Okay. I guess we should also email him a copy of this, so I presume it will be served. But anyway, I think at this stage, I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Douglas. Yes. Alana, do you have any comments back from them? Okay. Now.
All right. Well, in that case, I want to thank Susan and Courtney for their work on the order, and I move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Order passes 5-0. Thank you. Thank you.
Chair Weismiller, just to, again, for the point of clarification, this will be docketed just as any other order or decision, and so members of the public as well as everyone on the listserv will have ready access to.
Okay, that's good. Let's go on to minutes.
Move approval of the minutes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Minutes pass 5-0. Lead Commissioner, presiding member, Commissioner Scott.
Yeah, just real quickly, I wanted to take a moment to note what an honor and a privilege it has been for me to get to work for Governor Brown. I very much enjoyed his leadership, working on all things transportation and energy related, and note that I'm very much looking forward to working with Governor Newsom. Just a note on the transition. And then wanted to let you all know that I enjoyed some time off over the holidays with my family, which was really wonderful. I hope everyone else had a chance to do so as well. And wish you all a happy 2019. It's going to be another really busy, interesting, and fun year.
Yeah, so likewise, happy 2019. Hard to believe we're already a week in. So I wanted to echo that about Governor Brown. You know, those comments are wonderful, and he did all these interviews, exit interviews and stuff, and they talked to a number of his appointees and high-level officials and stuff, and a couple of them I noted said that, yeah, when I talked to him, he said, really, don't screw this up, don't, you know, and so I said, hey, he told me that too. He must be the standard line. Yeah, exactly. Exactly, yeah. Not appropriate for the transcript, I think. But things are moving in a great direction. I mean, just all the signals are great appointees thus far with the new governor, and our friend Kate Gordon is over at, going to be over at OPR, which is good. Unfortunately, has to step down from the COB, from the Prop 39 COB. But we have so much forward momentum that I think it's going to be contagious, and the folks coming in are going to be, eager to collaborate with us and have us assist them. I just wanted to highlight the collaboration with the CPUC on some of the forecasting stuff again. I think it came up during the meeting with that item with the forecast. But I think we'll again, we have a great foundation for collaboration at all levels with them. And 2019 should build on that. And then finally, I wanted to recognize Karen Holmes, who retired recently, and she was just such a stalwart. Maybe she'll be back as a retired annuitant. We'll see. But so helpful on many of the things that I work on efficiency and data and the data regs, particularly, but really across the board, and mentoring other younger staff. She was just really a real team player. So I enjoyed working with her and congratulate her on a nice retirement.
I'll be very brief as well and just join my colleagues in their comments. It's been a tremendous honor to be part of the Brown administration and to work with the governor's office on so many really exciting initiatives in energy and climate change. And I'm excited about the Newsom administration. I'm excited about the many things that we will have on our plates and that will get done in 2019. And I appreciate you, Andrew, bringing up Karen Holmes as well. I was reflecting recently that there are very few issues of a somewhat legal nature that walk into my office where I don't have some memory or reflection of Karen Holmes's involvement at some point in some way, and of course that's particularly been true on the siting side, but not only on the siting side. It is really across the board in the chief counsel side that Karen Holmes has just played this tremendous role. So thank you.
Some of these people are a little bit like the mafia. You can never truly leave. We'll come get you. Karen's been a tremendous asset, and I hope our paths cross again in some capacity with her. And I don't have many updates from the commission side of things, but just on just reflecting on the passage of time, it does feel like the years go by faster than ever now. And I remember, Mr. Chair, when I got sworn in the first time, my daughter, who was 7, sang at that. Remember at the SFPC, we did the swearing in. She's now applying to high school, and I'm starting to have to fend off boys. But I think the time goes by fast because the work is really rewarding, and it feels just remarkable to look back and see what we've done, particularly this last year, which for me, in the 20 years I've been doing clean energy policy, 2018 was far and away the most gratifying year of my career. Everything from the lighting standard to the zero net electricity and all the rest that we got over the finish line. I just continue to engage with a lot of folks from other states who are looking and I think really excited by what we're doing. And I do feel the tide is turning on public opinion on climate. I just actually wrote an op-ed with my mother about this. Now, for the first time, even within Republican voters in the United States, not only do a majority acknowledge climate change is real, but a majority now, a bare majority of Republicans in the United States support bold federal action on climate change, which is the first time that's happened. And I think what we're doing in California is showing you can bring a state together and that it can be beneficial to our economy and our society, and it's a real important test case. And so, not new to make that remark, but it is true. There's a lot of eyes on what we're doing, and I feel incredibly proud to work with all of you. I did especially want to acknowledge my assistant, Kathleen, who retired just a week or two ago after 17 years at the Energy Commission, and we celebrated her, and I just want to wish her a happy retirement as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, we can all speculate whether you get more gray hair either from your daughter growing up or from the work here, but right. I was going to note a couple things. I mean, one is in the wrap-up in December, I did have the opportunity, Karen and I both went up, Commissioner Douglas and I both went up to Paradise to see that, and that was obviously very touching, I think, to be there. And I also was back in D.C. for the National Academy of Science meeting. We're looking at doing some basically deep carbonization studies that, obviously it's hard to get much money out of the Trump administration for that sort of work, but they at least have some to help frame that. So we'll see how that comes together in the spring. But again, it was a pretty productive meeting. I think I mentioned earlier, that certainly, Governor Brown has really set the bar for governors of the state. I'd probably encourage people to look at the new book, Brown and Brown, by Miriam. It really looks at not only his legacy, but his father's, who certainly, as you're trying to figure out, who the greatest California governors were, Pat Brown's got to be pretty high up. I mean, obviously, normally you need some.
Who wrote that?
I'm going to say Miriam. I'm going to say
Brown and Brown.
Yeah.
Okay.
She did a great book. Actually, did two great books. One on Cesar Chavez and one on the farm workers.
Good.
So very, very thorough author and stuff, and took a similar approach to Governor Brown, and actually had access. I think he made one change, which was to put the wording on the tombstone to his grandmother to make sure that was put in the book. But that was the only change to that book. So again, I strongly encourage that, but it certainly looks at not only the two of them, but also going back to his grandfather coming over from Germany. So in a way, it does the arc of California history from the Gold Rush era to yesterday, more or less. So really fascinating story. Certainly, I think we all know Governor Brown is a fascinating character. See, going forward, at least for a long time, it was like if the phone rang really early or really late, I always had to guess who it was going to be, But anyway, I suspect that will continue on some level. Anyway, let's go on to Chief Counsel's report. Oh, actually, before I do that, out of character, but I had a special request from Laurie. So, I mean, normally, as you can tell, we all talk looking back, and she asked me to put a plug in for the EPIC Symposium, which will be held on February 19th at the Sacramento Convention Center. I'm not going to go through the whole plug, but just to say it's great. Certainly encourage people's participation. It's free. It's open to the public. It's going to cover really high points of what we've done. Great sessions, and I'm sure you're going to see more publicity on it as we go forward. So again, just to make sure people have that on the calendar. But anyway, Chief Counsel.
Nothing to report today.
Executive Director.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief, but I'm standing at the podium for two reasons. First, I want to show a visual that can appear to the folks that are on WebEx, and also to let you know that we're looking at adding additional cameras, because right now we have the one behind me, which shows the dais, and it's just a set shot, and then we have the one here that shows the podium, and we're looking at making it a little more dynamic so we can move around a bit, and then we don't have the situation where there are talking heads that aren't apparent because they're sitting over here. And it's just a little awkward to ask people to come up here every time.
Is there a feature that photoshops out the gray hair?
We can work on that,
okay.
Yes. Yes, I'll need that as well. What I wanted to show you that's a visual is this accomplishments report document. This is different from the volume one of the IEPR that Commissioner Hochschild led, which I think is an excellent look back at the last 8 years of our efforts. This just looks at 1 year, dives a little deeper into things that might not have made the greatest hits, but are also significant accomplishments. And you'll be getting a pack in a folder like this. It also has individual one-pagers. All this is on our website as well, but they go into each of our primary areas. So I just wanted you to see those things, and to thank Albert for his work on pulling all this stuff together, and a particular shout out to Bailey Wabshall, who is our graphic artist extraordinaire, who helps really make this stuff look, it can look good, but he makes it look fantastic. Thank you.
Public Advisor.
So I guess I'll have to stand at the podium as well. I do want to say also that I'm thankful to have served in the Brown administration, and I look forward to continuing under the new Newsom administration. And thank you to all of the commissioners who helped, support my role as the public advisor. It has been a very exciting year, I think, in 2018, which opened up a lot of opportunity for me to carry our commitment, our message, and our commitment of and priority of being inclusive with disadvantaged communities and focusing on our diversity commitment across the state and even across the country. I've had the opportunity to speak at a couple different conferences in other states. So I'm very thankful for that. Looking forward to ramping up those efforts, and I liked what Commissioner Hochschild said, mentioning bold new leadership and steps, and making sure that we continue our commitment to be even bolder going forward as we look at our 3 priorities of increasing the diversity of our applicants in our funding programs, increasing the benefits of our policies and our programs to include everyone in California, and then internally to increase the diversity of our workforce so that we can reflect the diversity of the state and benefit and leverage the richness that that provides. The last thing I want to mention is on January 25th, we will have our next Disadvantaged Advisory Community meeting. All of that will be on the notice, but I thought I'd put a plug in. It will be in Fresno, so I'm glad that we've been able to change locations around the state to make sure we have greater participation from everyone. Thank you.
Any public comment? This meeting's adjourned.